Mehmet Ali Aytekin is going to talk about the experiences, and also will talk about, again, thank you very much, under the economic conditions of today, the obligations of Hajj and Istita'at. Distinguished Chair, dear participants, I would like to thank Turkish Religious Affairs Authority, Presidency, and also we would like to thank Hajj and Umrah Services Directorate General, our Director General, Head of Departments, and all distinguished personnel of Directorate General. I would like to thank each and every single one of them. I will be very brief in my presentation and will talk about the obligation condition of Hajj and Istita'at under the economic conditions of today. My predecessors talk about some verses and hadiths about Istita'at. In order to save time, I will skip fast those parts of my presentation. Now, I would like to talk about what each sects are approaching to Istita'at from an economic point of view. Al-Faqih agreed on that Istita'at is one of the conditions, the obligation conditions of Hajj. Ibn Rushd Ibn Qudamah mentions that there is no differences of opinion in fuqaha. Let's look at Istita'at in Hanafi sect. Because of the hadith, it is focusing on the food and the right, but Istita'at is not only limited to food and right. There is a difference in terms of Istita'at being Mekki or non-Mekki. Those who have food and being able to walk are obliged with Hajj. And it is also mentioned that if you cannot afford it financially, Hajj is not fard for you. According to this, what we mean by Istita'at is that those who are living outside Haram, they should either have property and money with regard to accommodation, the horses, weapons, and clothing, and they should be able to leave enough income for the members of the parents until the pilgrimage is over. The capital used for commercial purposes are also considered to be the essential need. According to Maliki Istita'at, it said that anyone who can find way to be there can be counted as someone who needs to fulfill Hajj. In Maliki sect, Istita'at is not only limited to food and right, but also anyone who is able to walk are obliged to conduct that duty. Imam Malik thinks that it is quite clear from the verses, and Istita'at only limiting Hajj to food and right is only for those who cannot walk properly. And the sect itself formed itself around the discourses of Imam Maliki. And anyone who can walk up until Mecca are under the obligation of Hajj. If the blind people can find a guide, they should be able to do that. And also, those who can have their own income without needing anyone, who are also under the obligation of Hajj. It's a fard. Also in Shafi'i sect, it is shaped around the food and right. And those who have enough food and right can fulfill that duty. If they cannot do it personally, they can appoint someone else to fulfill that fard. Those who do not have income and right, but even they have it, but if they cannot find water, are not obliged with Hajj. Because if the individual needs to purchase those on the way with an higher price, then they are free from that obligation. And if the person is under debt, they can only be able to perform their Hajj duty after they pay their debts. If person needs alimony, and also there are some priorities. For instance, in Hanbali sect, Istita'at is considered around the right and the food economically. The measure of Istita'at says that a person should have enough food and right and be able to meet his or her own needs while he or she is away. That obligation to have a right is only applicable for those who are living far from Kaaba. And they should be able to have enough capital or the feed for the animal. These are some basic core needs. And anything outside the core needs can be spent or sold for paying Hajj costs. Let's look at Istita'at today in the light of sectarian opinions. Al-Faqihs are agreeing on Istita'at that it is an obligation condition, but then they have differences of opinion. And that differences of opinion are coming from Ali Imran Surah. That means that being able to find the way, that find the way statement is interpreted differently. Hanefi, Shafi, and Hanbali sects interpreted that as food and right, but in Maliki Mazhab it is for being fit for walking. Al-Faqihs have that differences of opinion, therefore it is directly affecting the scope of the Istita'at. Of course, it is hard to say that these old arguments are valid today. For instance, when it was possible to walk all the way to Hajj, some mujtahids are saying that it is an istita'at to walk through Hajj. But even Islamic countries, borders are very clearly cut. Therefore, it is only possible to access Hajj through seaways, airways, or land roads. Therefore, walking cannot be taken as an istita'at. Therefore, Maliki sect's opinion is not valid as of today. Al-Faqihs are also focusing on the food and right, and it represents an economic power and opportunity to be able to fulfill that duty. Economic power and capability is one of the main conditions to be obliged with Hajj. The minimum measurement here is that pilgrim, the candidate pilgrim, should be able to leave enough money for the ones who are left behind, and they should be able to perform that duty without needing support from others. If there is extra money or extra assets outside the core needs of individual, it can either be sold or can be used for Hajj. Also, there is a season for Hajj, and this economic power should be available during that Hajj season. Any type of economic power which is outside this Hajj season does not oblige you to fulfill your duty. The scholars saying that it is a violation of the rights of individuals if you do not pay your debts or if you do not pay the income of your family members just to go for Hajj, so that's the violation of the rights of others. And even if you do not have enough economic means, asking for help from others, begging, is also makruh according to Islamic faith. Scholars are talking about very sensitive issues with regard to istita'at, and it is not acceptable to avoid certain requirement and to be a burden to others. If those sensitivities are not considered, your Hajj will not be approved on a holy level. Therefore, the considerations and the conditions are clear, and majority is agreeing on those conditions. Of course, in old times, those changes were very slow, therefore the practices were quite similar with each other. Now we are in modern age, And there are significant changes in economy to transportation in all walks of life. And it is also reflecting to the daily needs of people today. Therefore, in the past, what is considered as being a core need is not a core need now, or what is not a core need in the past is now a basic need. Therefore, it has to be taken into account when the interpretation of today's obligations. Therefore, the core needs are now in a widespread condition. For instance, fridge, washing machine, dishwasher, television, telephone, computers, cars, technological gadgets. They are now almost the core needs, the basic needs of many people. Therefore, education, teaching, and spending for the education of people is one of the important spending items for families, educational costs. Therefore, they are also included among the core needs, the actual, the basic needs of families. Also, if families have children in the marriage age, it's a traditional role that this has to be covered by families, and now it is also considered as one of the core needs of the family. Especially for those living in big cities, house is not a need, but it is an obligation. And we know that buying a house is quite costly. And thinking that anyone who is trying to buy a house is also considered as one of the core needs of that individual. Having your own business or any spending to start your own business is also among your core needs, actual or basic needs. Therefore, in today's world, when you are talking about what is obligation or what is a core need, it should come from a wider perspective to your consideration. Therefore, in today's condition, Istita'at is covering the following things: house, electric and non-electronic gadgets, alimony, educational costs, telephone, computer, cars, any arts and crafts duties, the cost of marrying, purchasing a house, starting your business, getting debts, and outside the capital that you need to fulfill your job. And then that person should have enough cash or equivalent assets which can be turned into cash. And anything which is considered as an investment outside the core needs, the basic needs, can also be considered as an money which can be spent for Hajj. Even if they do not have enough money, but if they have a strong amount of asset, they are also under the obligation of Hajj, which can be turned into money as well. So there will be a responsibility here. As a result, Al-Faqih are agreeing Istita'at as an obligation condition for Hajj. The scope is shaping around the food and rights, and the changes are happening in all of these areas. According to that, the actual needs are now becoming an inseparable parts of our life, and they are all included in these core needs. Apart from those actual basic needs, in the time of Hajj season, those who can afford the cost of Hajj are under the obligation of that worship. Those who cannot afford that are exempted. Therefore, we can say that those Muslims are not obliged with Hajj if they do not have enough money, if they are spending the needs of their families, if they cannot get the visa, if they need to get debts, borrow money from others, they need to get credit from the bank, or they're trying to enter Saudi Arabia with no permission, are exempted from Hajj. They are not under the obligation. Sometimes Muslims are pushing the borders of karahat or even haram in order to fulfill their Hajj worship, even if they are not obliged to do that. Therefore, it has to be explained to Muslims very frequently and underlying that Hajj can only be performed under certain conditions as long as you are obliged to, as long as you have enough economic means. Of course, many people are admiring those who have this duty, and they said that you can only have that, or sometimes Umrah is an option. And some of the quota given to Turkey is given to those because there is a raffle, and those who are not obliged are also using that quota, and it is preventing those eligible Muslims to join that group, and that's a also responsibility here. Thank you very much for your attention.